The house with the poison. One day, when I came home from work, I saw my mother crying. "What's wrong, Mom? What happened?" I said. When she looked at me with fearful eyes, "Your brother. Look at your brother, he's gone crazy." I jumped up and went into the room where my brother was. I didn't notice anything strange. "Amit, is there something wrong, brother?" I said. She said, "No, brother, I'm fine." I didn't want to press her too much. The next day, when I came home again, I felt a strange fear as if the door of our house was moving away. Just as I was thinking about what was happening, I heard my mother scream. I quickly reached the door of the house. I put my hand in my pocket and tried to find my keys. Suddenly, I heard a wheezing but inhuman sound from inside, in addition to my mother's sobbing. When I heard this, I thought someone was attacking my mother and I stormed into the house. My mother and little brother were looking at me in the hall. "Mom, what happened?" I said. "Amit went crazy again. Your little sister attacked me and Fusen." I was very angry. I started to think that either my mother was lying to me or my sister had gone crazy. When I looked at my mother's face again, I saw her eyes full of fear again. Fusen was also very scared, but she still thought they were joking. Fusen is 5 years old. I was angry. Just as I was about to quickly enter the room where Amit was, Amit suddenly appeared at the door. Believe me, this was the first time I had ever been scared of my little sister. He was looking at me as if hostile. Then he turned around and went into his room. When I followed him and said Amit, he looked at me again and shouted, "Leave me alone, bro." I was angry. "I will kill you, son. My father will come in a moment. Either you tell me everything or it will be very bad. I will tell my father that you attacked my mother." "Okay, bro, but give me some time." "I will tell you everything," he said. For the first time, I felt that my brother was lying to me. That night, everyone had gone to bed. I started watching my brother. I went to his room and saw that he was sleeping. I had just turned around when a voice inside me said, "Your brother is looking at you," and I suddenly turned around, but he wasn't looking. Then, "Son, are you crazy?" I said to myself. I went to bed that night, but what a sleep. I couldn't sleep until morning. As if when I close my eyes, Amit is next to me. I feel sorry. "No, friend, it won't be like this," I said. "The best thing is to devote the whole day to my brother tomorrow and follow him silently," I said. Morning had come. Since I had woken up early, I told my mother, "I'll be back around 10 o'clock, and left. Amit had also woken up. My brother, who was very close to me, was now very far away. He didn't even come near me. As I was leaving, he said, "Did you sleep well last night?" I was startled. I left immediately without looking at him and went to the coffee shop. When it was 10 o'clock, I quickly walked home. I quietly entered the kitchen, because from there I could see my brother's room. I had previously closed the kitchen curtains tightly so that he wouldn't see me. He left only a small hole, so that he could see the whole room. My brother was in the room and was sitting on the couch, rubbing his knees, all by himself. Then he stopped suddenly. I also started to feel like my blood was draining. Then suddenly our eyes met. Oh my God! He had felt me looking through the tiny hole. I felt like I was going crazy. I quickly entered his room. My eyes were spinning. "What's going on?" I said, but there was no reaction. When I touched him, I felt him stiffen. When I said to my mother, "Mom, run," he grabbed my hand so tightly that I thought it would break. Then he wheezed, "I'm going to kill you," and fell to the floor. He was shaking or trembling. His voice had changed. I couldn't tell if it was a scream or a wheezing. My mother ran in. "Amit, my son. My Amit." I was as if I had frozen. It was as if I had just stood there. When my mother shouted to me, "Hold my son. He's going to hurt himself," I came to. It was as if even my mother and I couldn't hold my brother. Then he suddenly stood rigid. It was as if he was locked. His head had fallen back, his eyes had turned pitch black. It was as if his fingers had turned and were broken. He was looking at one point. My mother said, "Don't touch," and started to pray. In the meantime, I noticed a notebook. I picked it up. When I opened it, I saw something written in a different style of writing. Then, in a voice that could not belong to a human, Ahmet suddenly shouted to me, "Don't touch me." The notebook fell from my hand. I was scared. I thought he was going to attack me. His breathing had changed. He was looking at me. I couldn't notice the whites of his eyes. Then he started to throw his head from side to side and kept saying things in a strange voice or scream, "Brother, why did you look? Brother, why did you look?" Suddenly he stiffened. He slowly raised his arm. He pointed to the window with his index finger. Then he looked at me and started crying, "He's coming, he's coming." I shouted, "What's coming, what's coming?" My mother was reciting the verses without stopping. When the cleric suddenly called the call to prayer, "Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar," my sister went crazy. She fell to the ground like she was having an epileptic seizure. She was shaking. Every time the cleric said Allahu Akbar, my sister screamed. And she fainted. My mother and I were in shock. We started thinking, what can we do, what? I said, let's tell my father. My mother said, oh, he doesn't have faith, he doesn't believe. Mom, what's wrong with him not believing? Let him show you how he's a doctor. I said, I'm going crazy. Then my brother started saying, brother, brother. Ahmet, my dear brother. What's going on with you? Please tell me. Brother, wasn't I in bed? What am I doing here? What happened to me? He said. Don't you remember? I said, no. He said, brother, why is my mother crying? Why is my brother? At that moment, the doorbell rang. My father had come. Mom, let's tell my father everything. Don't hide it. That night, we decided to talk to my father. The strange thing was that Ahmet was never strange around my father. It was completely normal. That night, my father was sipping his whiskey and reviewing patient reports. I knocked on the door and went in. What happened, Murat? He said. I said to my father, Ahmet. But I took a breath once. I wanted to talk to my father calmly. Even though I was 25, I was still shy of him. I said to my father, I want to talk to you about something. He said, not now. I have an important surgery the next day. I need to review the reports, but I was determined to tell him. Ahmet. I said. Please, Dad, just listen. It's very important. When I said, okay, but keep it short. My father was calm. I told him everything that had happened today. He listened to me calmly. Then suddenly, get out of here, I don't believe in such things. Okay, that's enough. Get out, I have to work, he said. I was very angry. Just as I was heading for the door, a terrible scream came from Ahmet's room. The lights of the house were going on and off. It was scary. The house was like cracking from the columns. I turned and looked at my father. Go ahead, Dad, explain this incident, I said. He must have had a bad dream, he said. Then we headed towards Ahmet's room. I said to my father, so why did the lights go on and off? He said to me, don't be so stupid. We live in the 21st century, he said. When we approached Ahmet's room, the open door suddenly closed and locked from the inside. My father said, what's going on? Then my brother's screams started coming from the room. I saw my father panicking for the first time. He said to me, break the door. Break the door? What are you looking at? I broke the door. When we went in, Ahmet was sitting in the corner of the wall with his back to us. He was wheezing and saying, I'm going to kill you, I'm going to kill you. My mother had also come. The poor woman started reading the surahs out loud. My father said, what are you doing? Ahmet was screaming as he heard the surahs. Then he fell on his back on the floor. Foam was coming from his mouth. My father said, he's having an epileptic seizure, and went to him. I was trying to hold Ahmet. His seizure was over. He woke up. Dad, brother. What's going on? What am I doing on my floor? He started to cry. My father said to me, you, sleep with your brother tonight. Tomorrow, we'll take him to a psychologist. I said to my father, Dad, this is beyond a psychologist. He said to me, don't talk, then tell me. I couldn't argue with him. Everyone left the room. Amit, my dear brother. What's happening to you? Brother, is something happening to me? He said. He seemed to have forgotten. Okay, nothing's happening, I said, but I didn't think he had forgotten. Come on, let's go to bed, I said. We laid down, taking my brother into my arms, and started talking. When I said to him, you were going to tell me everything, he said, brother, I want to tell you everything, but they said they would kill me if I told them. Who are they? Who? I said. Please, brother, don't force me, he said. Before going to bed, I read the prayer I learned at school. Ah, I said. Why didn't I listen to my mother and learn the Quran before? I thought to myself. My brother had fallen asleep, I was still thinking. I closed my eyes for a moment. I felt as if a light breeze was blowing in the room. I got scared and immediately turned my attention to the right and left. I looked at the window my brother had pointed to when he fell to the floor. I wonder if it was open. It wasn't. I was about to fall asleep, examining the room left and right, trying to think of beautiful things and looking left and right again, when something caught my attention. There was a picture of my brother on the wall. A beautiful picture. He always seems to be looking at a point. In other words, he doesn't seem to be looking into his eyes when he lies down, but it was as if he was watching me. I felt uncomfortable. I got up and put the picture away. I lay down next to my brother again. I read the prayer I knew over and over again. The room was quiet. I closed my eyes. Then I felt the door open. I was again attentive. I looked in the direction of the door. The door was indeed open. Then I started to pray again. I would not be afraid, because I had taken refuge in the one whose power and might are infinite, Allah. My faith was at its peak that night. Something inside me was saying, don't be afraid. Then I closed my eyes. I felt a weight at my feet. It was as if someone had climbed onto the bed. It was slowly climbing up to my chest. But I would not be afraid. Then I felt it squeezing my body. I opened my eyes, but I could not turn my head. I suddenly said, I am not afraid of you, but of your Creator. When I said this, the weight seemed to increase even more. I started to cry inside. Please come, mother. Please come, mother. Yes, I was crying inside. Then the door opened. The weight disappeared. I lifted my head and my mother said, Mother, mother. It is good that you came. I said. My mother did not say anything. Mother, I said. Son, if you want, you can go to your room. I'll stay with your brother, she said. No, I'll stay, I said. Son, she said. Get up now. I looked at my mother, but oh my God. You can't be my mother. What are you? Who are you? She didn't make a sound. She just stared. Her feet were backwards. I started to pray. Then I don't understand how it happened, she disappeared somehow. I realized that I shouldn't have left my brother alone that night. I fell asleep while thinking about what I should do. It was very interesting. In my dream, I was walking down a long dark corridor. Then I realized Amit was in front of me. As I ran towards him, he was moving away. Amit, stop. Amit, stop, brother. I was shouting. He said, brother, help me, brother, and suddenly disappeared. I started running faster. When I realized I couldn't catch up, I stopped. Something inside me was saying, come back. Come back. I was out of breath. When I turned around, Amit suddenly grabbed me by the throat. He was squeezing. I was literally suffocating. When I opened my eyes and realized that Amit was choking me and my mother was sobbing and trying to save me, I threw Amit off me. He was laughing at me. I said I would strangle you. I said I would strangle you, he was laughing. He turned towards the wall and started to scratch the wall with his nails. When I saw this, I jumped on him. I said to my mother, "Let's tie him to the bed." My mother and I tied my brother to the bed. My brother went crazy. He said to me, "Dirty homo, dirty homo. Don't bring the teacher, don't you dare. Or UF *** me," he was saying. How did he understand the teacher? My father had gone to work early in the morning. He was going to have surgery at around 7 o'clock. Before he left, he told my mother, "Bring Ahmet to the hospital. Let's take him to the psychologist." I left the house saying to my mother, "I'm coming now." I was going to find a teacher. I found a teacher on the advice of my friend. I told him everything and brought him to our house. As we climbed the stairs together, the teacher started to recite prayers. My mother had left the door open because she saw us coming. When we approached the door suddenly closed. My mother opened the door again. I went in, the teacher did not. He looked at me and said, "I can't go in at first." When I asked why, he said, "This house is not good at all." "Who sold you this place and when? What does that have to do with it?" I said, "The same thing happened to the person who sold you this place." "How do you know?" I said, "The person who sold it to you sold it very cheaply." And he didn't say anything. He said to me, "Who recommended me to you?" "My friend Dursun," I said. "Then call Dursun." "Why?" I said. "You call Dursun." I called. "Dursun, I stopped by today. Hello, yes, I'm listening to you. To find me a teacher." Dursun suddenly started laughing on the phone. He asked me, "Have you been drinking?" "No, what does that have to do with it?" I just said, "My friend, didn't you send me off to my hometown the other day?" I was shocked when he said, "Haven't you come yet?" "Yes, who did I talk to then?" I said, "Oh, come on, I'm busy. I'll call you when I'm done." He said and hung up on me. While I was thinking, what's going on, the teacher quickly entered the room where my brother was. I was stunned. I could only say, "You. Who are you then?" When the teacher entered, my brother let out a terrifying scream, You. I know you." The teacher said to my brother, "In the name of the Creator, the Lord. He created man from a blood clot. You poor thing," and started reciting verses. I still couldn't figure out what was going on. Who was this person? Then he started talking to my brother. "Leave these people alone," he said. My brother said, Brother. Get him out of the room." He started crying. I was still in shock from the phone call. Then this person said to me, "Come on, hold your brother tight." He called my mother too, but before holding him, he wanted us to perform ablution. We did. That is, as my mother showed me. Then we went to my brother. The teacher started reading the Quran at his bedside. When he told us, "Come on, hold him now," my mother and I immediately held him. My brother was screaming. His eyes were changing between black and blood red. Then his bed started shaking. The wardrobe doors in the room were opening and closing. We could hear the sound of breaking plates from the kitchen. While the lamps were being turned on and off, the lamp in the room we were in exploded. Then there was a sudden silence. My brother had fainted. "Is it over?" I said, turning to the person I had brought as the teacher. "No, it will never end as long as you stay here," he said. "Before you, a family lived here. It was a very beautiful family. Then a paranormal event occurred with their little son. At the beginning, their son got up to drink water at night. While he was walking down the corridor, the door of the room we are in now opened. At that time, they used this room only for guests. When the child went in to see who opened it, the door suddenly closed and the child's scream rose from inside. And then what? I said, "Okay, that's it." After that, it was the end. He said. He asked me, "Do you know the Quran?" "No." I said. "What about you, Auntie?" My mother said, "A little." She turned to me and said, "Why didn't you learn?" I couldn't answer. Do you know that good and evil come from Allah? He said. Yes, I said. When he asked, what is your father's faith? I still couldn't answer. He said, that's your weak link. He said, move out of here in 3 days, or someone in your family will suffer. What? Moving, is that so? How can I make my father accept this? I asked, that's none of my business. He said. He headed towards the door. He was leaving. Then he looked at me from the outside door and said, that boy who went to get water. I couldn't say anything. I just nodded my head, yes. That was me, he said, and quickly walked away. I stood up quickly. I ran to the door. I hadn't finished my questions yet. But he had already left. That day, when the teacher said that, my mother and I said, we can't stay in this house anymore. My brother had also come to his senses, and we convinced my father with difficulty. And exactly on the 3rd day, something happened to my father here, and now he is a religious person, and we moved out of that house. 3 years had passed. One day, I had some business in that neighborhood. When I went, I said, let me look at the house. It had a big garden. The house was 3 stories. My father had given it to a contractor to tear it down and build houses, but the contractor didn't want to tear it down. There had always been setbacks in their work. One of the workers had lost his mind and another had been seriously injured. When the contractor realized that he could not demolish it, the house was simply abandoned to its fate. They had locked the garden gate and hung a sign saying, entering is dangerous and forbidden. As I passed by, looking at the garden of the house, I saw the door of the house open. It was as if the house was calling me. I turned around without looking back and never went near that neighborhood or even within a mile of that house again.